While you were sleeping last night, India made a move that has economists in Washington scrambling for answers and Wall Street quietly panicking. I'm not talking about a war, or a scandal, or some celebrity drama. I'm talking about something far more powerful, far more permanent. Here's the stat that should wake you up. India's economy grew 8.2% in Q2 2024. The United States, 2.1%. That's nearly 4 times faster. But that's not even the shocking part. What happened in a 72-hour window in September 2024 changed the global power structure in ways most Americans still don't understand. And it's not just about numbers on a screen. It's about your job, your savings, your future. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe. And I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Let me show you what I mean. Meet Sarah Chen. She's 34, works as an engineer at Tesla, lives in a nice apartment in Fremont, California. Good job, solid career path, right? But in August 2024, she noticed something weird. Internal memos at work kept getting rewritten. Production timelines were changing. And one word kept appearing over and over again: Bangalore. At first, she thought it was just outsourcing, the same old story we've heard for 20 years. But then she dug deeper, and what she found made her stomach drop. Here's the thing nobody's talking about. August 2024 wasn't just another month. That's when India officially surpassed China as the world's most populous nation. 1.43 billion people versus China's 1.42 billion, according to the United Nations. The media covered it for about 48 hours, then moved on. But they missed the real story. Because while reporters were writing clickbait about population explosions, something far more significant was happening in boardrooms across America. Over 400 Fortune 500 companies now have their largest R&D centers not in Silicon Valley, not in Austin, not in Boston, but in Indian tech hubs like Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune. Your job might be next, but not for the reason you think. This isn't about cheap labor anymore. Indian engineers are designing the Tesla you'll drive in 2027. They're coding the AI that'll diagnose your health issues. They're building the chips that power your iPhone. And they're doing it faster, leaner, and often better than their American counterparts. Sarah discovered that her entire department's next-generation battery project had been transferred to a Bangalore team of 40 engineers, most of them under 30, working at a pace that made her 15-person California team look sluggish. The kicker: the Indian team delivered the prototype 4 months ahead of schedule. But the real shock, the one that has Pentagon strategists losing sleep, came when India announced something the United States never saw coming. September 9th through 11th, 2024. Mark those dates. That's when India hosted the G20 summit in New Delhi. And in those 72 hours, they pulled off what the Council on Foreign Relations is now calling the most significant diplomatic coup of the decade. While American news networks were busy covering Trump's latest indictment and Biden's approval ratings, India was quietly reshaping the global order. They brokered the African Union's entry into the G20. They secured trade deals with 47 nations. Let me repeat that: 47 countries, 3 days. The United States signed fewer trade agreements in all of 2023 than India secured in one weekend. Let me tell you about Rajesh Kumar. He's 29, runs a fintech startup in Mumbai, and he walked into that G20 summit with a pitch deck and a dream. His company had developed a payment system called Rupee, Unified Payments Interface, and during a side meeting with Brazilian banking regulators, he showed them something that made their jaws drop. He showed them how Indians were using their phones to transfer money instantly, with zero fees, to anyone, anywhere in the country. No credit cards, no bank delays, just instant, free transactions. The numbers: India's Rupee processed 13.4 billion transactions in April 2024 alone. according to the National Payments Corporation of India. To put that in perspective, that's more digital transactions than all US credit card transactions combined for an entire quarter. Within 60 days of that meeting, Brazil adopted the system nationwide. Transaction costs for Brazilian small businesses dropped by 67% overnight. But it didn't stop there. Indonesia followed. Thailand jumped on board. The Philippines launched a pilot program. Singapore, already one of the world's most advanced financial hubs, integrated UPI for Indian tourists and workers. Now here's the twist most American media won't tell you, because it doesn't fit the China versus America Cold War narrative they're addicted to. This isn't a zero-sum game. When Brazil's economy gets more efficient, American companies doing business there benefit too. When India processes payments faster, global commerce speeds up. Apple, Amazon, Google, they're all leveraging UPI now for their Indian operations. Everyone wins. But then India played its MasterCard, the move that made even China's leadership privately admit they'd been outmaneuvered. Let's talk about the one advantage that can't be bought, can't be faked, and can't be stopped. People. Young people. Working-age people. The fuel of every economy. And America? We're running on fumes. The Stanford Global Demographics Report from 2024 laid out the numbers, and they're brutal. By 2030, just 5 years from now, India will have 850 million working-age citizens. That's people between 15 and 64, in their prime productive years. The United States will have 173 million, and a huge chunk of those will be nearing retirement. Marcus Thompson knows this reality better than most. He's 52, worked on the assembly line at a Ford plant in Detroit for 27 years. Good union job, decent benefits, thought he'd retire from there. Then, in March 2023, the plant closed. Not because of automation, because the entire design and engineering division moved to a hybrid model with teams in India. Marcus could have been bitter. A lot of his coworkers were. But here's where his story takes a turn. Ford offered him a new position, training engineer. His job: teach a team of 15 Indian engineers, remotely, how to build the systems he'd spent 3 decades perfecting. He almost said no. But his daughter convinced him. Dad, you can retire with anger or retire with purpose. So Marcus took the job. And in his words, they learned in 3 months what took me 3 years. Not because they were smarter, they were just hungry. And they asked questions I'd stopped asking 20 years ago. Here's what Marcus found that he didn't expect. Collaboration, not competition. Those Indian engineers weren't stealing his job, they were extending his legacy. When that team launched a new electric vehicle platform 9 months later, Ford credited Marcus and his trainees equally. The product won an Industry Innovation Award. Marcus told me something I'll never forget. I thought I was training my replacements. Turns out I was building something bigger than myself. Those kids in Bangalore send me messages on my birthday. They call me Guru. Last month, one of them named his son after me. And Marcus isn't an outlier. A 2024 study from NIT's Work Innovation Lab found that US companies using hybrid teams with Indian partners saw productivity increases of 34% on average. Not despite the collaboration, because of it. The smart companies aren't choosing sides. They're building bridges. They're recognizing that India's youth wave isn't a threat, it's a resource. And the companies treating it that way are the ones dominating their industries. But there's one sector where India's move is causing genuine panic in Washington. And if you own stocks, you need to hear this. January 2025. While America was focused on inauguration ceremonies and political theater, India quietly inaugurated something that changes everything. Its first fully operational semiconductor fabrication plant. Let that sink in. For decades, the entire global economy has been dependent on Taiwan for advanced chips. One island, one geopolitical flashpoint, one potential crisis away from collapsing the tech industry. And India just cut that dependency by 40%, according to the India Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Dr. Priya Mehta spent 15 years at Intel in Oregon. Brilliant scientist, comfortable life, American dream achieved. But in July 2024, she did something her colleagues thought was career suicide. She moved back to Bangalore. She was 41, at the peak of her earning potential, and she walked away. I asked her why. Because in America, I was maintaining systems built in the 90s. In India, I'm building the systems that'll power the 2040s. The energy is different. The possibility is different. I came back because India is building the future I want to be part of. When Priya landed in Bangalore, she joined a team of 200 engineers, average age 28, working in a facility that looked nothing like Intel's pristine Oregon campus. It was scrappier, louder, more chaotic, but the pace was electric. Within 3 months, her team had designed a chip architecture that reduced power consumption by 23% while increasing processing speed. Intel had been trying to solve that exact problem for 4 years. Right now, the United States produces only 12% of the world's semiconductor supply. We invented the technology, we perfected it, and then we outsourced it. India just captured 8% of global production in 18 months. If that pace continues, they'll surpass us by 2028. Harvard Business Review's December 2024 issue called it the fastest industrial transformation in modern history. And they're not using massive subsidies to get there. They're using something more powerful: speed and adaptability. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't about India winning. It's about America losing focus while we're distracted by culture wars, political scandals, and social media outrage cycles. We're arguing about who said what on Twitter while India is cornering the market on the chips that'll power artificial intelligence for the next 50 years. And then there's the move that's keeping Treasury Department officials awake at night. The one that could end the dollar's 80-year reign as the world's reserve currency. Because what India did with the rupee isn't just bold, it's revolutionary. And if it works, the global financial system will never be the same. November 18, 2024. That's the date you need to remember. That's when India and the United Arab Emirates completed their first crude oil transaction entirely in Indian rupees, bypassing the US dollar completely. Reuters reported it. Bloomberg covered it for 30 seconds. And then the story disappeared from American news cycles, buried under election coverage and celebrity gossip. But in finance circles, panic. Because here's what that one transaction represented. 18 countries now accept the Indian rupee for trade settlements. 18. In 2020, that number was 0. In 4 years, India has built an alternative financial system that doesn't require American approval, American banks, or American currency. Aisha Patel runs an export business in Mumbai. She's 38, ships textiles and manufacturing equipment to Middle Eastern buyers. For years, she had to convert rupees to dollars, pay conversion fees, deal with exchange rate fluctuations, and wait 3 to 5 days for transactions to clear. In December 2024, she completed her first rupee-based contract with a Saudi buyer. The money transferred in 4 hours. Her shipping costs dropped 22% because she wasn't paying conversion fees and banking charges. And she had certainty. No more worrying about the dollar strengthening overnight and wiping out her profit margins. Now, you might think this is just one woman's business getting more efficient. But scale that up. The Bank for International Settlements, basically the central bank for central banks, released a report in 2024 showing that the US dollar's share of global reserves has fallen to 58%. That's the lowest level since 1995. Every year, more countries are asking the same question. Why do we need dollars to trade with each other? But here's what CNN and Fox News won't tell you. Because it doesn't fit their America under attack narrative. India isn't trying to destroy the dollar. They're creating alternatives for nations that are tired of financial sanctions, political leverage, and being told who they can and can't trade with. They're offering sovereignty, and in a multipolar world, sovereignty sells. Russia got cut off from SWIFT. They started trading with India in rupees. Iran facing sanctions, rupee-based oil deals. Venezuela isolated. India stepped in with alternative payment channels. Even Federal Reserve economists, in a January 2025 internal memo that leaked, acknowledged this might actually be healthy. Quote, currency competition could force stronger fiscal discipline and innovation in financial services. In other words, even our own central bankers are saying, competition might make us better. But there's one move India made that even their closest allies called dangerously bold. A move so audacious that when it succeeded, it humiliated some of the richest nations on earth. August 23, 2023. India lands a rover on the moon's south pole. Total mission cost, $75 million. NASA's Artemis program, planning a similar mission, has a budget of $93 billion, with a B. Let me say that again because it sounds fake. India explored the moon for less than what some Hollywood movies cost to make. And they didn't just get there. They found water ice, transmitted data for weeks, and did it with technology that cost 1,200 times less than the American approach. Commander Lisa Rodriguez is a NASA astronaut. She's 45, flew 2 space shuttle missions, and in June 2024, she visited ISRO, India's space agency, as part of a diplomatic exchange program. I saw her interview with Space.com, and I'll never forget what she said. They're doing with duct tape and determination what we do with gold-plated equipment and endless committees. I'm not exaggerating. I watched them solve the thruster problem with improvised parts in 40 minutes. That same problem would have taken us 6 months and 3 review boards. It was humbling. India's space economy grew 400% between 2020 and 2024, according to their space research organization. They're launching satellites for 30 countries. They're undercutting SpaceX on price. And they're doing it with engineers who earn a fraction of what their American counterparts make, not because they're exploited, but because their cost of living is lower and their ambition is sky high. Arjun Shah is 23 years old. He designed a microsatellite for agricultural monitoring that cost $2 million to build. SpaceX is launching it in March 2025. If it works, it'll provide real-time crop data to farmers in 15 countries, potentially preventing famines before they start. Arjun grew up in a village without reliable electricity. Now he's building satellites. That's the India most Americans never see. Nature Journal, one of the most prestigious scientific publications on Earth, published a study in 2024 analyzing India's frugal innovation model. Their conclusion: this approach could democratize space access and accelerate scientific discovery by reducing cost barriers. Now, critics will say, sure, but India still has slums. Their infrastructure is crumbling. How can they fund space programs when people are living in poverty? Fair question. Let me show you why that criticism is about 10 years out of date. Because these photos started circulating in January 2025. And when the skeptics saw them, they went completely silent. Yes, India has slums. Yes, there's poverty. I'm not going to sugarcoat reality or pretend every Indian citizen is thriving. That would be dishonest. But here's the stat that'll blow your mind. India built 111,000 kilometers of highway in 8 years. The United States, in that same period, built 8,000. According to the World Bank's 2024 infrastructure report, India built 14 times more road infrastructure than America, while dealing with monsoons, bureaucracy, and yes, poverty. James O'Connor is a 56-year-old construction executive from Dublin. He spent 30 years building bridges and highways across Europe. In 2022, he took a consulting job in Mumbai, expecting a nightmare of delays and corruption. Here's what he told Engineering News Record: "I've never seen this velocity in my life. Projects that would take 10 years in Europe, with endless environmental reviews and community consultations. Finish here in 18 months. And they're not cutting corners, they're cutting bureaucracy. The Delhi-Mumbai Expressway, 1,350 kilometers of world-class highway, completed in 4 years. During a global pandemic, with rest stops, service plazas, and solar-powered lighting. The same week, California officially cancelled its high-speed rail project after spending $10 billion with nothing to show for it. India inaugurated its third bullet train corridor. It's almost comedic, except for the part where it reveals how sclerotic and dysfunctional American infrastructure planning has become. McKinsey Global Institute projects India will invest $1.4 trillion in infrastructure by 2025. For context, that's more than the GDP of most countries. And they're not borrowing that money, they're generating it through growth, efficiency, and a young population entering peak earning years. But let's be honest, there's still massive inequality in India. Rural areas lag far behind cities. Women face systemic discrimination. The caste system, though legally abolished, still casts a shadow over millions of lives. And yet, 415 million Indians escaped poverty between 2005 and 2024, according to the UN Development Programme. That's the entire population of the United States plus Germany, lifted out of extreme poverty in 2 decades. Is India perfect? Hell no. Is it improving faster than any large nation in human history? The data says yes. So here's the question that's been gnawing at me while researching this. Why isn't this the top story on every American news channel? Why are we not talking about the biggest economic shift since China's rise in the 90s? The answer is uncomfortable. Because Americans are taught to look down, not across. I'll be honest with you, I'm guilty of this too. I'm a journalist, and for years, I covered American politics like it was the center of the universe. Mar-a-Lago drama, congressional hearings, Supreme Court decisions. Important stuff, sure. But while I was obsessing over domestic controversies, the global order was reshaping itself. A Harvard Kennedy School study from 2024 analyzed cable news coverage and found something embarrassing. US media spent 340 hours covering domestic political drama for every 1 hour devoted to India's economic rise. Think about that ratio, 340 to 1. We spent more time debating whether a candidate's tweet was offensive than understanding that the world's most populous democracy was building an alternative to Western-dominated finance, technology, and trade. We're arguing about pronouns and bathroom bills while India is rewriting the rules of 21st century power. And I'm not saying those social issues don't matter. I'm saying we're capable of paying attention to more than one thing at a time. But our media environment has made us functionally illiterate about the world beyond our borders. But here's the silver lining, the opportunity hidden in all this. Ignorance creates arbitrage. While most Americans are sleeping on India's rise, smart entrepreneurs are capitalizing. 47 US startups opened Indian divisions in Q1 2025 alone, according to Crunchbase. They're hiring talent, building partnerships, and tapping into a market that's growing faster than anywhere else on the planet. Dylan Brooks is 29, runs a SaaS company out of Austin, Texas. In 2023, his revenue was plateauing. He was competing against 100 similar companies, burning through cash on customer acquisition, barely breaking even. Then he partnered with a development team in Hyderabad. Within 6 months, he rebuilt his platform with better features, cut his development costs by 60%, and expanded into Asian markets his competitors hadn't even considered. His revenue multiplied by 10 in 1 year. He told TechCrunch, "Best business decision I ever made. And I almost didn't do it because I believed the stereotype that Indian developers were just cheap outsourcing. Turns out they're world-class, and I was the ignorant one." Dylan's company now employs 35 people, 22 of them in India, 13 in the US. His Indian team handles development, customer support for Asian markets, and data analysis. His US team focuses on sales, marketing, and strategic partnerships. It's not replacement, it's amplification. So now we're at the moment of truth. The question that determines whether you personally benefit from this shift or get left behind watching it happen to other people. Here's the reframe, the perspective shift that changes everything. This isn't India versus America. It's adaptation versus stagnation. Maria Santos is 41, works as a business consultant in Seattle. 3 years ago, she was assigned to a project with Indian colleagues. She expected language barriers, time zone headaches, cultural misunderstandings, all the stereotypes. Instead, she learned methodologies she'd never encountered in her MBA program. She saw problem-solving approaches that made her realize how rigid American corporate thinking had become. And when the project ended, she didn't say goodbye. She started a cross-border mentorship program. Now she's featured in Forbes. Her consulting practice has tripled in size, and half her clients specifically seek her out because she understands how to bridge US and Indian business cultures. She's not alone. Cross-border collaborations between the US and India grew 290% from 2020 to 2024, according to the World Economic Forum. The companies and individuals winning aren't picking sides, they're building bridges. India's rise doesn't require America's fall. That's the scarcity mindset that's kept us stuck in zero-sum thinking since the Cold War. The global economy isn't a pie with fixed slices, it's a garden. And when one region blooms, it creates opportunities for pollination everywhere else. Unless America chooses to build walls instead of greenhouses. So what do you actually do with this information? 3 things. 1. Learn from India's frugal innovation model. Stop over-engineering solutions. The best answer isn't always the most expensive one. American companies waste billions on unnecessary complexity. India's success comes from ruthless simplification. 2. Partner, don't compete. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or freelancer, explore Indian partnerships. Not to exploit cheap labor, but to access talent, markets, and perspectives you don't have. The future belongs to networks, not fortresses. 3. Focus on speed and adaptability. India's competitive advantage isn't resources, it's velocity. They make decisions in days that take us months. They iterate, fail, learn, and move forward while we're still in the planning phase. That's the skill that matters in the 21st century. The IMF's January 2025 projection says India becomes the 3rd largest economy by 2027. The United States remains the largest. The pie is growing. There's room for everyone who's willing to evolve. Sarah Chen, the Tesla engineer we met at the beginning. She didn't lose her job. She got promoted. Because instead of resenting the Bangalore team, she became their bridge to California. She learned to work asynchronously, to leverage time zones as an advantage, to integrate diverse perspectives. Marcus Thompson, he's retiring next year with a pension, stock options, and 15 Indian engineers who call him family. Dr. Priya Mehta, she's filing patents that'll change computing architecture for decades. These aren't victims of India's rise. They're beneficiaries, because they adapted. The question isn't whether India will continue rising. They will. The question is whether you'll rise with them or spend the next decade complaining about change you can't control. Here's what I need to know. Would you rather keep pretending America has no competition, or accept reality and learn from what's working? Because one of these responses builds the future, and the other buries you in the past. Tell me in the comments, is India's rise a threat or an opportunity? And be honest, when's the last time you actually learned something about India that wasn't from a movie? Drop a comment right now. Let's debate this like adults. Because ignoring the biggest economic shift of our lifetime won't make it go away. It'll just make you irrelevant. The world is changing. Fast. You can either change with it, or get left behind wondering what happened. Your move.